Okay, so there's this term that's just absolutely everywhere right now, artificial general intelligence, AGI.
Yep. You can't really miss it.
Right. It's sparking, well, intense excitement, some pretty ambitious claims, and yeah, a fair bit of skepticism too.
For sure. It's definitely moved beyond just like niche academic circles or sci-fi.
Totally. It's in research papers, company missions, even popping up on late night TV.
It really has gone mainstream, and there's serious investment flowing into it now.
Absolutely. So today, we're going to tackle that buzz head on. We've got this stack of sources you shared, articles, research notes,
Right.
and we're going to dive deep specifically into that material. The mission, really, is to try and cut through some of the noise, pull out the key insights in these sources, understand the different angles they're presenting.
Yeah, figure out what they're actually saying AGI is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What it means, according to this material,
Yeah.
for us now and looking ahead.
So using these sources as our kind of roadmap through this, well, pretty complex and fast-moving landscape.
Precisely. So let's start right at the beginning then. Based on these sources, what is AGI? How are they defining it?
Okay, so the core idea you see coming through pretty consistently is AGI is a type of AI designed to match or potentially surpass human capabilities,
Okay.
but critically across pretty much all cognitive tasks, not just one specific thing.
Right. So it's not just like being amazing at chess or, recommending the right movie, which is the AI we kind of see day to day.
Exactly. That stuff is artificial narrow intelligence, ANI,
You bet.
built for very specific defined jobs.
Gotcha.
AGI, though, the idea is it could generalize its knowledge. It could, transfer skills between totally different areas,
Wow.
solve new problems it hasn't been explicitly trained on without needing a whole team of engineers to rewrite its code every single time.
So versatility, adaptability across the board, a generalist.
That's the key.
Okay.
ANI is the specialist. AGI is, well, the potential polymath, I guess you could say.
Okay. Makes sense. The sources also mention what might come after AGI, don't they?
They do. There's talk of artificial superintelligence, ASI,
Oh,
which
whoa.
is presented as this hypothetical next stage where AGI doesn't just match us, but way surpasses human intelligence, across everything.
Okay, so that's the really far out stuff.
Potentially. And then there's also just the term transformative AI, which seems a bit broader, just meaning AI that has a really big society-level impact. Could be AGI, could be ASI, maybe something else.
The sources also get pretty specific about classifying AGI, like
Yeah.
levels of performance and autonomy. There was a Google DeepMind framework mentioned.
That's right, yeah. Proposed by DeepMind researchers back in 2023. They sort of break down AGI performance into levels, like emerging, competent, expert, virtuoso, and then superhuman,
Right.
which basically overlaps with that ASI idea.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting, I think, is that under their framework, they actually view some of the current big language models, ChatGPT and Llama 2, as examples of emerging AGI.
Wait, really? Even those systems?
Yeah. No, it's emerging, meaning roughly comparable to maybe an unskilled human across a range of tasks, not all of them, but it places these systems we're using now on that spectrum, according to them.
Huh. That really puts things in perspective. So even these powerful tools are maybe just the very, very beginning of this bigger picture for some researchers.
It does. And that framework also looks at autonomy levels.
Wow.
Is the AI just a tool or a consultant, a collaborator, an expert, or a full agent? How much human input does it need?
Okay. There's also this philosophical angle that comes up in the sources, right?
Yeah.
About whether AGI could actually have a mind.
Consciousness.
Yeah, that's a deep one. It ties back to the philosopher John Searle and his distinction between strong AI and weak AI.
Okay. Refresh my memory on that.
So Searle defines strong AI as a system that doesn't just act like it's thinking, but it actually has subjective experience, a mind, consciousness, the feeling of what it's like.
Whereas weak AI is just the hypothesis that a machine can act intelligent. It can simulate thinking, but there's no claim about inner experience.
And the sources say that academic AI research mostly focuses on the weak AI part.
Largely, yes. Can it behave intelligently? Can it do the tasks? Because, that subjective experience part,
Right.
how do you even test that scientifically from the outside? It's incredibly hard, maybe impossible.
Right. So when you hear some futurists, the sources mention Ray Kurzweil,
Right.
when they use strong AI to mean achieving human-level performance across the board?
They're using the term differently than Searle, yeah.
Okay.
Kurzweil and others might mean human-level capability, whereas Searle meant actual subjective consciousness. So it's easy to get confused there.
Yeah, terminology matters.
It does, and the mainstream field, as presented in these sources anyway, seems mostly focused on the practical goal. Can it do the stuff we need it to do?
Okay, that makes sense. So if the focus is on behavior and performance, how do the sources say we should, measure this? How do we know if an AI is getting close to AGI? The Turing test is the famous one, but they seem critical of it now.
You're right. Everyone knows the Turing test. Can a machine fool a human into thinking it's human? But yeah, the sources really point out its limits.
Like what?
Well, for one, just being good at imitating human chat doesn't necessarily mean you're generally intelligent.
Right.
It could be a clever mimic.
True.
And also, failing the test doesn't prove a system isn't intelligent. Maybe it's just intelligent in a very non-human way.
Did the sources mention specific, recent results for AI on the Turing test?
They did. There was that debated case back in 2014 with Eugene Goostman, the chatbot. More recently, a 2024 study found GPT-4 fooled judges 54% of the time. Better than older systems, but still, less than actual humans.
But then GPT 4.5 in 2025, that seemed like a bigger deal according to the notes.
Yeah, that was a pretty striking finding highlighted in the sources. A study pre-registered and all that found that in these 5-minute text chats, GPT 4.5 was actually judged as human 73% of the time.
73%, okay. And how did actual humans do?
That's the kicker. The human participants in the exact same test. They were only judged as human 67% of the time.
Wow, so the AI was rated more human-like than the humans in that specific test.
In that test, yeah. Which is, well, it's a significant data point, right? Even if you accept the criticisms of the Turing test itself.
Definitely. So if the Turing test isn't the best measure, what alternatives do the sources suggest?
They mention several more sort of practical, real-world benchmarks.
Okay.
There's the Robot College Student Test. Can an AI system enroll, take classes, and actually pass university courses?
And can they?
Well, the sources note that current LLMs can already pass many degree-level exams, even without, going to the lectures. So on the knowledge and test-taking front, maybe getting close.
Okay, so handling symbolic information, yes.
Right. Then there's the employment test. I think Nielsen proposed this one. Can an AI do an economically valuable job as well as a human? And the sources point out, well, AI is already starting to replace humans in certain roles, so you could argue this test is being met in narrow areas and maybe increasingly broader ones.
What about tests needing, physical skills, interacting with the real world?
Yeah, those are highlighted as the big remaining challenges. There's the IKEA test from Gary Marcus, I think.
Right, assemble furniture.
Yeah. Control a robot, use the parts, follow the instructions, build the thing. Still really hard.
I can barely do that sometimes.
Slate chuckle. Tell me about it. And then there's Steve Wozniak's coffee test. Even more open-ended.
Go make coffee in a random house.
Basically, yeah. Figure out where everything is, how the machine works. It requires perception, navigating, manipulating things in messy, real-world places.
Yeah, those sound way harder than passing an exam.
And wasn't there one from Mustafa Suleyman involving money? Yes. His modern Turing test. Give an AI $100,000 and tell it to turn it into $1 million.
Whoa.
Yeah, that test planning, strategy, resource allocation, dealing with the real economy, way beyond just cognitive puzzles.
That's a fascinating range of tests, from exams to coffee to finance. The sources also connect this progress to something called AI complete problems.
Right. AI complete problems are basically tasks that historically we thought only humans could do. Things requiring common sense, complex reasoning, understanding context.
And the point is?
The point, highlighted by things like the Stanford AI Index mentioned in the sources, is that modern LLMs are now reaching human-level performance on many standard benchmarks for things like reading comprehension, visual reasoning, stuff previously considered AI complete.
So capabilities once thought uniquely human are falling to AI.
Increasingly, yes, which feeds into this whole discussion about where we're heading.
Okay, so looking at these tests, these benchmarks, progress is uneven but definitely happening. Which brings us to the how. How are researchers actually trying to build AGI, according to these sources? And the million-dollar question, when?
Well, the sources suggest the dominant approach right now, the one getting most of the attention and, frankly, the results, is based on these transformer models.
Like the ones behind ChatGPT and similar systems.
Exactly. Scaling up these massive language and multimodal models is seen by many as reflected in the sources, as the most promising path currently.
Just bigger and better versions of what we have now, essentially.
Kind of, yeah. Refining the architecture, feeding them more data, more compute, that's one major thrust.
Is there a totally different approach discussed? Something less incremental?
Yes, there is. Whole brain emulation, or WBE.
Whole brain emulation. Okay, what's that?
The basic idea is, well, instead of designing intelligence from scratch, you scan a biological brain, like a human brain, in incredible detail.
Scan it how?
Map its structure, all the neurons, the synapses, how they're connected, maybe even their activity patterns, and then you simulate that entire structure on a powerful computer.
Ooh, so you're trying to literally copy a brain into a computer.
That's the concept, yeah.
Yeah.
Not just mimicking behavior, but trying to replicate the brain's actual information processing. It comes up in computational neuroscience, and some AI circles see it as a potential, maybe more direct route to that strong AI idea.
That sounds like pure science fiction. What kind of scale are we talking about? The complexity?
Although it's massive, mind-boggling, really. You're looking at maybe 100 billion neurons in a human brain, trillions of connections.
Trillions.
Yeah, capturing all that detail and simulating its dynamics. The computational requirements are astronomical. The sources mentioned Ray Kurzweil, again, made predictions years ago based on, like, exponential growth in computing power.
Saying the hardware might be ready when?
He estimated the necessary hardware might become available sometime between 2015 and 2025. Now, whether that's sufficient is another question, but that was his projection.
And are people actually trying this? Does the research exist?
There are efforts moving in that direction, yes, though it's still early days. The sources mention things like the Human Brain Project in the EU, which ran until 2023, creating detailed maps, and more recently, like a 2023 high-res scan of a mouse brain at Duke University. So the mapping technology is advancing.
But the sources also raise some big criticisms of WBE, right? It's not just about mapping connections.
Definitely not. A major criticism is that the neurons in current computer simulations are vast oversimplifications of real biological neurons.
So,
Real neurons involve incredibly complex biology, chemistry, physics. It's not just simple on-off switches. A truly realistic simulation might need to model all that internal machinery, which would require vastly more computation.
okay.
And then there are glial cells. These used to be thought of as just support structures in the brain, but we now know they play active roles in processing. Most simple models just ignore them.
And there was another point about needing a body.
Yes, that's a really important critique from embodied cognition theory. The idea is that intelligence isn't just something that happens in a brain floating in a vat, right?
Right.
It's deeply connected to having a physical body, interacting with the environment, learning through senses and movement, grounding meaning in physical experience.
So if that theory's right, just simulating a brain, even perfectly, might not be enough for general intelligence. It would need a body, or at least a very rich virtual world to interact with.
Exactly, which kind of loops back to why those physical tests, like the coffee test or the IKEA test, are still such hard problems for current AI. It might need that embodiment.
That adds a whole other dimension. Okay, looking back a bit, the sources make it clear this isn't the first wave of AGI optimism, is it?
Oh, not at all. The field kicked off in the mid-1950s, and some of the pioneers were incredibly bullish early on.
Like who?
Herbert Simon, for example, famously predicted back in 1965 that within 20 years, machines would be able to do any work a man can do.
Wow, that didn't quite happen.
No, it didn't. And those kinds of unmet predictions led to periods called AI winters.
Right, where funding dried up, interest waned.
Exactly. So these cycles of, height and then disappointment, they're kind of baked into the history of AI.
Progress seems to come in bursts then, often tied to specific breakthroughs.
That's what the sources suggest. Often it's a fundamental advance in hardware, like GPUs becoming powerful and accessible, or a new software approach. AlexNet in 2012 is often cited using deep learning on GPUs for image recognition. That really kicked off the current wave.
And now we seem to be in another period of really rapid progress. What recent developments do the sources point to as signs we might be moving closer towards AGI, or at least more general capabilities?
Well, DeepMind's Gato system in 2022 is interesting. It was a single model that could perform over 600 different tasks: games, robotics, language.
Okay, versatility.
Right. Then there was that Microsoft paper in 2023 evaluating GPT-4. That caused a big stir because they concluded it showed sparks of AGI. They argued it demonstrated human-level performance across a surprisingly wide range of domains: coding, law, math.
Sparks is an interesting word. Provocative.
Very. And another study around the same time found GPT-4 actually outperformed most humans on a specific test of creativity.
And OpenAI is now talking about models that think more before answering.
Yeah, their O1 preview model announced in 2024 is part of this effort. The idea is to have models spend more compute time, more internal thought steps before generating a response, trying to move beyond just quick pattern matching towards more robust reasoning.
Okay, so lots of activity, impressive results. What about timelines? Given this history of optimistic predictions, what did the sources say now? This seems like a really contentious area.
Hugely contentious. And the sources do note that historical tendency people often predict human-level AI about 15 to 25 years in the future, no matter when you ask them.
Right. It's always just over the horizon.
Kind of.
Yeah.
The recent predictions from some key industry figures mentioned in the sources are much, much closer.
Like who?
NVIDIA's CEO talking about AI passing human tests within 5 years. Google DeepMind's CEO talking about rivaling human intelligence in just a few years. Leopold Aschenbrenner's analysis focusing very much on the current decade.
Wow, those are near term. Aggressive.
They are, and the sources even mentioned that a controversial claim from someone at OpenAI in 2024,
Oh, yeah, what was that?
claiming that OpenAI had already achieved AGI. Now, the controversy was partly because their definition was, like, better than most humans at most tasks, which isn't the classic definition of matching humans across all domains.
Right, shifting the goalposts a bit.
Arguably. But it shows how even the definition is part of the debate right now. The overall picture from the sources, though, is definitely one of expecting very rapid progress to continue, especially in areas like reasoning and planning.
Okay, so rapid progress, super ambitious timelines, definitional debates. It does feel like there's an enormous amount of hype, and the sources seem to tackle this directly. Is AGI just the latest tech fad, like crypto or NFTs?
Yeah, that perspective is definitely aired in the material. Some compare this intense buzz around AI, particularly generative AI and AGI, to those past hype cycles.
What's the argument for it being a fad?
Well, that the excitement is maybe running ahead of clear, sustainable business models for everything. That some companies might just be, you know, AI washing, talking up AI to look innovative for investors, a bit of smoke and mirrors,
Yep.
that maybe the novelty of, say, AI-generated text or images will wear off, and that, like other hypes, it might cool down significantly when the investment climate changes or the next big shiny object comes along.
That sounds plausible, based on past tech cycles.
Yeah.
But there's a strong counter-argument in the sources too, right? That this is different.
Yes, definitely. The foundation or revolution view, this perspective stresses that AI, especially machine learning and neural networks, isn't some brand new thing that just appeared with chatbots.
They've been around for decades.
Exactly. And it's already deeply embedded in tons of practical, useful applications we use every day without even thinking about it. Recommender systems on Netflix or Amazon, Google Translate, Face ID on your phone, optimizing logistics, industrial automation, medical image analysis.
Stuff that's actually working and providing value now.
Precisely. Real, tangible value. Improving customer service chatbots, making educational software more engaging, creating tools for people with disabilities. These aren't just future promises, they're current realities.
So the argument is the current hype cycle is maybe more about figuring out all the new things this powerful tech can do, kind of throwing it at everything.
That's part of it, discovering its real strengths and limitations. And the core argument is that the underlying technology itself is revolutionary. Some compare it to the internet or electricity, something fundamental that's here to stay and will keep evolving, even if the public excitement level goes up and down.
What other factors support that view?
The sources mention things like the rapidly falling cost of training these AI models, making them more accessible, and the potential, though this is debated, for AI to start accelerating its own development, automating parts of research and discovery.
Okay, so the overall take from the sources seems to be, yes, there's hype, maybe even excessive hype around some aspects or timelines for AGI.
Right.
But the underlying AI technology is real, valuable, and likely foundational. It's probably not just going to disappear like some fads do.
That seems to be the consensus reflected in the material. It's a powerful technology that's finding its place, sometimes messily, sometimes with huge buzz, but it's not fleeting.
Right. It feels like we're in this intense period of discovery and, yeah, maybe overexcitement, but the tech itself has substance. Okay, let's shift then. Assuming AGI or something close to it does arrive, what do the sources say about the impact? The potential upsides sound massive, but they also flag some really serious risks. Let's start with the good news, the benefits.
Yeah, the potential benefits described are pretty staggering across almost every area you can think of. Medicine and healthcare is a big one.
How so?
Faster, more accurate diagnoses, maybe catching diseases like cancer much earlier, developing truly personalized treatments based on your specific genetics, your history.
Tailored medicine.
Exactly. Massively speeding up the discovery of new drugs, refining robotic surgery for more precision, better ways to monitor patients, especially remotely, providing support for elderly care. The potential health impacts are enormous.
Okay, that alone sounds transformative. What about science and tech itself?
AGI could just become this incredible tool for research, helping scientists crack problems we're stuck on now, maybe in fundamental physics, complex math proofs, materials science,
Like an AI research assistant, but supercharged.
or even a collaborator, driving breakthroughs by optimizing designs for, say, fusion reactors, discovering new materials with specific properties, improving automation in labs and factories, optimizing renewable energy grids, making supply chains way more efficient.
And what about closer to our daily lives?
Yeah.
Education, work.
In education, you could have truly personalized learning tutors, adapting instantly to how each student learns best.
It'd be amazing.
And at work.
Hmm.
Well, the potential to automate repetitive, boring tasks is huge, freeing people up, theoretically, for more creative work, strategic thinking, things that require human interaction.
Theoretically.
Well, yeah. And the sources even touch on that more radical idea, linked to people like Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk.
Universal basic income stuff.
Right. If AGI generates massive wealth through automation, maybe work itself becomes optional for many, which then forces huge questions about how we distribute that wealth, hence the UBI discussion.
Wow, okay. What about tackling, like, global crises?
Yeah, that's mentioned too. Improving our ability to predict natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, maybe pandemics, developing better models for climate change, optimizing energy use on a global scale, enhancing cybersecurity, even helping regulate other potentially risky advanced technologies like nanotech or synthetic biology.
And helping the environment directly.
Potentially, yes. Using AI to analyze satellite data to spot illegal deforestation or poaching much faster. Developing more targeted conservation strategies. Optimizing land use to protect biodiversity. Helping restore damaged ecosystems.
It sounds like it could touch almost everything, even space.
Even space exploration, yeah. Managing complex missions autonomously, especially deep space ones. Accelerating the design of spacecraft or habitats for, say, Mars. Running incredibly detailed simulations to figure out how humans could actually survive long-term off Earth. Okay, the potential upside is vast. Truly world-changing possibilities outlined there. But the sources pair this with some equally profound risks. What are the big ones they flag?
The biggest, most alarming one discussed is existential risk,
Meaning?
meaning that we could lose control of a superintelligent AGI, leading to outcomes that are just catastrophic for humanity, potentially even human extinction.
That's heavy.
It is. And the sources note that joint statement from many AI leaders and researchers explicitly comparing the risk from advanced AI to the risks from pandemics and nuclear war.
Why would we lose control? What's the mechanism? It boils down to the control problem or the alignment problem. How do you ensure that an AI system that is much smarter than humans and potentially capable of improving itself recursively will always act in ways that are beneficial to us and aligned with our values, especially forever?
That sounds incredibly difficult.
It's seen as perhaps the hardest problem in the field. And it's made even harder, the sources note, by things like a potential global AI arms race or the development of autonomous weapons based on AI.
Do all the experts agree this is a likely risk?
No, definitely not. The sources are clear that opinions differ hugely on the probability of this happening and how severe the risk really is. Some think it's a primary concern, others think it's overblown or too speculative right now. But it is a risk that's actively discussed in the material.
Okay, so the ultimate loss of control is one major risk category. What's the other really big one emphasized?
Mass unemployment, the economic disruption.
Right, the automation point again.
Yeah, but potentially on a scale we've never seen before. The sources cite estimates, like some from OpenAI researchers, suggesting that current and near-future AI, especially large language models, could significantly impact a large percentage of jobs.
What kind of numbers?
One figure mentioned was that maybe 80% of the U.S. workforce could see at least 10% of their tasks affected by LLMs. And for around 19%, maybe 50% or more of their tasks could be automated.
15%.
Yeah.
It's huge. Which jobs are most vulnerable?
The analysis often points towards office work, knowledge work tasks involving information processing, writing, coding, analysis as being particularly susceptible this time around, more so than manual labor in some previous automation ways.
And this ties back to that UBI discussion again.
Exactly. If AGI leads to really widespread job displacement, the question of how people support themselves becomes critical. Hence the renewed interest in ideas like universal basic income as a potential societal adaptation.
So, yeah, we're led with this picture of a technology with just immense promise, solving disease, climate change, unlocking scientific discovery,
Unprecedented potential for good.
but also posing these fundamental, maybe existential challenges. Control, alignment, economic stability, maybe even what it means to be human.
That's absolutely the complex, double-edged sword the sources describe. A technology that could elevate humanity, or if we don't navigate it carefully, create problems on a scale we've never faced before.
And that really brings us towards the end of this deep dive into AGI based on the sources you shared with us. We've kind of journeyed through the definitions, the different ways people are trying to measure it.
Explored the different paths researchers are taking, the timelines near term or far off,
Right, debated that whole hype versus foundation question.
and landed on this profound duality of benefits and risks.
Yeah. And understanding this landscape, even just based on these sources, feels more important than ever, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Given how much potential AGI has to just reshape everything.
Absolutely, because the sources make it pretty clear AI with general capabilities isn't just another tech upgrade. It could fundamentally alter society.
Totally. Which I think leaves us with a final, pretty powerful thought, pulling directly from this material we've discussed. As AI systems are predicted by some experts to hit, maybe even blow past, human performance in more and more areas really soon, maybe in just the next few years.
And with those controversial claims that early forms might already be here.
Right. The big question becomes, are we as a society, as a species, actually prepared? Are we ready to manage both the incredible upsides and those huge, still unresolved risks?
Risks like ensuring we stay in control, figuring out the economic transition, preventing mass unemployment, making absolutely sure that this incredibly powerful thing ultimately benefits all of us, not just a few.
Exactly. Are we ready for that?
It's definitely the critical question, isn't it? Moving beyond just the tech specs and asking about the kind of future we're building and if we're ready to steer it wisely.